Legacy leader, we're humans. We're meant to evolve, make mistakes, get back up, and be stronger. And more importantly, be more aligned. This goes the same if you're a business owner. Your business and you as a human will evolve, where we need to learn how to honor our voice and not get distracted by others. So in this episode, I'm joined with one of my business besties who happens to be my brand strategist, Tiffany Neuman. Side note, if you've noticed, I tend to hire my friends. So going back to Tiffany, Tiffany's a brand strategist who's been a creative director for Fortune 500 companies, such as Adidas, FedEx, and Burt's Bees. So Tiffany and I will be discussing all the behind the scenes of how my brand, Elaine Blue, has evolved in the past almost 6 years. We'll be sharing lessons learned, what I deleted, what I've tweaked, and what I've done to make sure I'm aligning to my voice at this present moment, because I also am aware that it may evolve. And my intention for you, legacy leader, is during this episode, I want you to answer the bigger question of how can you honor your voice and not the trends. So let's drop the beat. Legacy leader, welcome to the Color Your Dreams podcast for women of color and allies. I'm Elaine Lucartas, your host and a business and career coach that LA Weekly named the #1 thought leader and Apple News named one of the top 5 business coaches. I know you've established yourself in a leadership and executive role, and this podcast is here to remind you that you can create a holistic life so you can lead without sacrificing your well-being. So expect me and my guests to have some conscious conversations with you on creating intentional direction and sustainable strategies so that you can create an aligned team, career, business, and life. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a one-size-fits-all prescription. You'll learn how to define your own holistic leadership so you can prioritize a life led by fulfillment and self-trust. Now, grab your coffee, tea, or boba, and let's follow your dreams to lead your legacy. Hey, legacy leaders. So I'm excited to have my own brand strategist and a close friend of mine. We've started business around the same time, but I have a Tiffany Neuman, an incredible brand strategist, legacy maker and leader. Legacy is all about her branding, similar to my branding, as all of you have known. And we're going to take you through the evolutions of the Elaine Blue brand, as well as the importance of having the foundations for your own brand if you're a business owner. Tiffany, welcome. Thank you for coming. I was going to say thank you for having me. Thank you for coming.
All good. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here and talk about the evolution, because I remember back in the day when we had your original brand reveal and everything, and now it's come full circle, and I can't believe how much time has passed and everything that's happened. It's amazing.
Well, and before we start dissecting my own business, and I'd love for you to even share your own similar experiences, because we just had a friend catch-up call on Friday and we were going through the same things, but I would love for you to share with our audience your experience prior to your business, because you didn't just pick this up. You've had decades of experiences. So go ahead, share about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for sure. So I have been doing branding and design work since a little kid, honestly, but I went to college for it. And then I worked my way up from an intern all the way to creative director at a Fortune 500 marketing company, working with brands like Burt's Bees, Stoli Vodka, FedEx, Adidas, just so many big brands, and really built up a department and led a team around actually the world for these big companies. And so I realized at some point that I was an entrepreneur at heart. I just didn't realize it, right? I was doing it in the corporate world. I had my daughter, like a lot of people do if they have kids, and like was like, oh, this is burning me out, even though it was my dream job. Like I was doing what I thought I wanted to do. But really, what I found I wanted to do was help women business owners create what I call their legacy brand, and really took all that experience from the corporate world, but also added in, like when I started my business, like we said, we started around the same time. Although the funny thing about that is I still held on to that for like a good year and like did both things while I was starting to build. But I realized how hard it is as a woman entrepreneur to build a brand and like what that really means, because I had to do it for myself. And I was like, this is like deep work. This is not easy, even though I was a branding expert. So long story short, that's what I do now. I've been doing for a while, and it's just been like super amazing.
And when you mean that it was hard, what did you mean by that? And I could share even my own experience. What made it hard for me to build a brand is I was looking at what everyone else was doing. So this is the time when like the baby pink color was very popular. So I was like, okay, I guess my website has to be baby pink. And I thought I had to do what other people are doing. But in reality, it's okay, who am I?
Exactly.
And it's not how can I stand out, but what best showcases me and making sure I stay true to myself. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you said it really well. That's the main thing is we tend to look externally rather than internally to create our brands. And we don't understand what a brand truly is. Most people think it's, oh, I'm going to grab, like you said, a pretty pink color and a cute logo, and that's my brand. But there's so much more foundational work to it. I actually consider it a spiritual process because you're uncovering who you are as a person. And oftentimes, if you've been in corporate or you've had kids or just life happens, you kind of lose touch of who you truly are at your core essence. So when you find that, you automatically stand out because people feel it energetically, right? It's an energetic, when you're an energetic like match with your brand, people feel that and they want to be in your energy. So it's so much more than just like strategy, although there's of course strategy to it. But yeah, it's really like coming into your own and finding out who you are. And then how do you visually portray that?
I will say with coming into your own, so 2017 is when I started. It is now 2023. So almost 6 years into my business. My business anniversary is July 14th July 14th. And I was sharing vulnerably with Tiffany when we were catching up last week of how this past 2 years has been more of a way of making sure I'm going inward and being confident in what I'm doing and not being distracted by what everyone and everything was happening outside of the world, especially in 2020 when we were all stuck behind our screens. And we still are, but it was interesting. The best thing that happened was asking questions for myself. People are probably going to be burnt out in the future. That's what I told myself. Like, I think 2021, when my business doubled, my business actually increased a lot in 2020. I don't know if that happened for you as well.
Yeah, I doubled for like a couple years in a row then, for sure.
Yeah, I doubled, but that burnt me out. And I realized I couldn't do all the things I was doing. So I had to restructure in a way that felt good for me rather than because I just kept doing it for a long time.
Yeah, so similar between that and like growing a team. And I think we all evolve in our brands too. It's like the business and the brand, they can evolve together, right? But when you have a good foundation, then it's not as difficult.
Yeah, it is. So should we delve into my brand evolution?
Sounds good. Yes, I'm excited.
So just so for everybody that is listening, there will be visuals that we'll be sharing. So you could go to the show notes. So go to elainelu.com/show notes. And you can also see all of this through my website too, just even the evolution. But I want to talk about my first logo. I'm also going to be sharing my screen, but my first logo was something I made, and it was essentially my signature that just said Elaine Lu. It was my signature. I actually had my friend basically took a copy of that and made it cleaner. And my logo is Elaine Lu. And that was a big deal to name my business Elaine Lu because for my fellow Asians or immigrants out there, my full first name is Elaine Liu. It's not Elaine. Everyone has always called me Elaine. So I thought it was cute. Okay, I'm going to step into my full name, Elaine Liu. My last name's Cartas, Elaine Liu Cartas, but I really want to step into that. So Tiffany, I wanted to know what made you decide to want to keep this logo? Even though it wasn't something you made, it was my signature.
Yeah. So when we dove in, you're like, I don't know, I just kind of made this logo. And I was like, actually, we should keep it because, like we talked about, when you really dive into your brand and you have a personal brand, there's nothing more personal than your own signature in my eyes. And it would be like the main logo on your website. But I think that's what people also get a mix up is they put so much time and energy into one logo that's meant to say everything about their brand. And really, what I wanted to dive in to spend the time on is really creating logos for your offers, because that's what people are going to see most. Like when you're doing your launches and when you're promoting, like they're going to see the Elaine Liu logo. And because it also had like a sentimental feeling to you, because you created it, it's your actual signature. So I was like, let's keep that, but let's focus on the offer logo. So really, when I'm looking at a brand, it's creating a whole offer suite that's together. And so many people are like, oh, my brand is like this one logo that everything has to like rely on. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. And actually, another thing, I mean, I told you how important it was for making sure I honor the legacy and the generations before me, especially since I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents immigrated from the Philippines as farm workers in Central California at Sanger, California. I lived in Porterville, California. And what shocked me was I didn't even tell you, but you chose colors of the Philippines flag, but it wasn't the exact colors. It was like a modern twist, like a shade or two shades different. Yeah, it was a variation. I'm actually...
Otherwise, honestly, it started looking like red, white, and blue Americanish in a way. So we decided I was looking at it. I was like, let's do like a modern cool twist on it.
What made you decide that? I just would love for you to share so people could understand the branding strategy behind it, not just because Elaine talks about it, or maybe it is a combination of both. I don't know.
I think it was a combination. I mean, like you said, you did have kind of that like boss babish pink look, which again, there's nothing wrong with. But when we had talked about it, you're like, it's just not really me. And it was really a trend, right? And I like to help people create trends, not follow them personally. So yes, that's what I say. A legacy brand creates trends, does not follow them. So when we talked about like your heritage, and I love looking at, people's backgrounds, their heritages, what's important to them. And then also looking at like color psychology and brand strategy. Like a lot of times people just pick a color because they like it, but also, and that's cool, but does it make sense? So for me, like I do love like the color of my wall, peacock blue. So that is one of my brand colors, but there's also the core essence of like trust is in blue, right? So it's good to have blue in your brand if it makes sense, but also what you're pairing it with. So yeah, we really dove into like, how can we include your Filipino heritage, but not also just make it seem like super obvious, but also like fun loving like you are but also have depth, right? Because the pink didn't have a ton of depth to it, where these colors, like with the gold and things like that, just felt like it had more depth.
Just curious. I mean, I'm going to share back the brand guide that you shared with me. What is the psychology behind the colors that you chose for me and why it felt aligned to you? So just for people that are listening and they're not looking right now, there's like a dark maroon red, a dark blue, then there's like a dark gold, turquoise, and almost black. So there is primary colors and secondary colors. So I'm curious what that conveys in an emotional, psychological sense.
Yeah. So again, knowing that you wanted to go sort of in that color palette, but then we added like the turquoise and glitter gold to it. So the deep water blue is really like a grounding color. It's like I said, blue invokes trust. So that allows just that like really groundedness. And I think that was where the pink, again, nothing wrong with it, but pink and gold, it's a little bit lighter and girly, where you talk about some serious subjects, right? Like, when we met, you talk about like mindset and obviously business and strategy, but like women of all colors and DEI and all of the things. So we really wanted that to showcase like that you're deeper than normal. And then red, like a bright red, actually evokes hunger, which is hilarious because like if you see all the fast food out there, like everybody has red in their logos and in their colors. But the main thing is also there's a fierceness to red, right? There's like a resilience to red. There's a fire and a hunger to red, which I felt like really represents another side of you, right? But a fierceness in like a kind way, but like there's a resilience and a fierceness that I feel that you have, and that also you could show the clients. Turquoise is another color that's just a really, it happens to be one of my favorites also. So I end up using it with clients if it fits sometimes. But in this case, it's a very calming color, but it also represents, like, if you think of like a peacock, just really showcasing it's very regal in a sense, kind of like purple. And then gold, yellow in general is a happier color. So there's a few clients that I've actually used yellow as their main color because that's just like their personality. But I think you have this positivity to you, but also it's like a deeper positivity. And then gold too. I mean, obviously it represents like money and wealth. And so that's a piece of the brand too, because obviously that's one of your goals of helping clients. So there's a little piece to everything. And then black and white, I think, is the foundation of most brands, but I didn't want to use a really harsh black because when you use, it can work good in some brands, but with these colors, like a full black kind of clashed a little bit. So we use like a 90% black.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I've had these colors for how many years and I didn't even know what it meant. So thank you for sharing it. And another thing that was brilliant, and also a lot of your audience members loved what you did with my brand. And I will say, I'm so lucky to have worked with you in 2019 before 2020, because it just established me as an authority and created trust.
Yeah, divine timing. I think everything happens divine timing, but your brand, I do case studies in some of my presentations sometimes, and I'm like, couldn't have been better timing for sure.
Yeah, it was the best timing. So I had my Color Your Dreams free event as well as my Color Your Dreams. I did the free events every month. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, it was still every month, if not twice a month virtually. Then there was a Color Your Dreams retreat. And then I had my Align Legacy Mastermind. Everything had a heart shape. And I remember all your audience members loved it. Like, I want that too. Like, wait, I can't just give you the heart. There's a reason why I chose it specifically for Elaine. But I wanted to get your perspective on why you chose the heart for me, and even your mindset and process of how you choose logos for other people. Because I think so often people think, hey, I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to tell them how the logo wants to look like, as opposed to having complete trust with the brand strategist to have them understand who you are so they could showcase that into a logo.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that people made. And it's true. Like, if you're just starting your brand, I'll be the first to tell you, like, just go like what you did when you started. Grab your name, write your name, do whatever, just come up with a logo to play, like to get started, right? But when you're serious to have a brand that creates a legacy so you can live your legacy now, as I like to say, since like we are so aligned on legacy, then you really need to do the deep work to uncover, like we said, your essence, how that parlays. And I think so many people go to a designer, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're like, let's just make something that looks pretty or looks cool, rather than really doing the deep foundational work. So like you came through my group process where we go through that and we look at your vision, your values, your voice. What are your unique, offerings? What is your whole brand story? What is your main messaging? So you had some of those things in place, but you were kind of transitioning from like a career coach to, we can talk about what the tagline we changed to in a minute. So basically looking at that and doing the deep work, I was able to get to know you so well. And this is how I work with all my clients, whether it's in the group program or one-on-one, to then that's where the visual manifestation comes into play, right? It's not too many people put the cart before the horse and do that visual piece first. And they're like, oh, I guess I better figure out everything else. And they don't realize that their messaging and all of their foundational work is part of their brand. And so once we got through all that deep work, then it was so easy. I was like, this is obvious. Well, I guess I'll just say the tagline now, like we support women of all colors. Actually, that was your mission statement, like that you're supporting women of all colors in your Color Your Dreams movement. And that's the main thing when we talked is like, you're a career coach, but you're like, I really want to honor my heritage and be a coach for women of color. And I was like, okay, well, this is inclusive. It's amazing knowing you and that you're heart-centered. The heart just seemed like an obvious choice without being like a cheesy, cutesy heart, right? Like it's this bold heart with a C and D to really represent
So brilliant.
the brand. And then we use like a sans serif font combined with a script font to give it some personality. And so it was still really professional and high end, but also relatable and approachable because we didn't want to position it too high end because again, like the whole point is to be inclusive.
And when we were working even on taglines, I remember one of the taglines you stated was color your dreams, create your legacy. And I haven't even shared this with you too, but I still do both executive career coaching and business coaching. I'm attracting more like clients who are at a higher level in their career and also generating a lot more income in their business. So with my marketing strategist, we changed color your dreams, create your legacy to color your dreams, lead your legacy. That one word choice, we just changed it. But I wanted to share with people, like, I know a lot of people get really worried. Wait, but my business is going to change. Yes, it will. It's going to evolve. That's why we're having this podcast episode. But it was so easy to evolve because what you don't want to do is confuse your audience. People know that I am an executive career coach and business coach. I coach women of color and allies. Super easy. I have the Color Your Dreams movement. I have the Color Your Dreams podcast. Why is this so important? Because so that it doesn't create confusion. I would love for you to share that.
Yeah. Again, I would say, I said the other piece is, not having the foundation is the biggest mistake I see people making. And it really ties back into that because a lot of people will, again, hire designers or they're making a new brand for like every offer. Like, oh, my membership is going to look like this. And then my website looks like this. And then it completely confuses your audience. I once had a client who had like 36 Kajabi courses. I mean, she was amazing. She was doing good in business, but it was so confusing. People would follow her on Instagram, fall in love, and then go to work with her and be like, I don't even know what you do or who you are or where to begin, right? So what I love to do with people is take that confusion and create like brand pillars. So like, again, it's very clear. Everything ties together. You have a branded system. So then that's what when I say legacy, of course, it means the same legacy that we're talking about, leaving a legacy. I like to talk about living your legacy now, but also the point in your branding is then you don't have to reinvent the wheel every year. You don't have to be like, oh, I have to like create a new brand for this and a new brand for that. And then like you're evolving and then things don't match anymore or you don't feel aligned anymore. So you have to completely redo it. Like you've had this for a while now. And yes, you make small tweaks and you every once in a while call me up and be like, hey, we need a new logo because I'm like shifting my offer. I'm adding an offer. But because you have a branded system, it literally, we can do it in like a day or two rather than like doing this whole rebrand all the time. And that the thing is that people rebrand way too often, even established like 7-figure entrepreneurs I've worked with and like newer entrepreneurs. It's like, once you do it, you want to stick with it. So I work with a lot of people who are even higher level to do their like legacy brand. Like, let's do this right. Let's do it so it's aligned with who you truly are. So you don't have to keep changing it all the time.
And also, it's okay if you like delete stuff and change things. So I'm going to give all of you. And it's bound
to happen, honestly, right? Like we both shifted things in our business.
Yes. Well, one of the major mistakes I did, and I have an incredible lawyer to help, is I did not trademark a brand or a name. I had an incredible name. It was called the Aligned Action Mastermind. I'm going to share my screen, but Tiffany created this beautiful heart shape with the 2 A's. It looked beautiful. And then I found out because I was going to finally trademark it because that was being so cheap. Like, I'm going to wait until I have more money, which is important, but you need to protect yourself. And it got taken. It got taken literally a month before.
Yeah. I want to talk about the importance of this because how often even happened to me with legacy brand. And it happened with somebody I knew, unfortunately. And luckily, we use the same lawyer. I had literally just applied for a trademark. So luckily I was able to get mine, but that person tried to file right afterwards. And my lawyer was alerted and she was like, somebody is trying to take your brand. And we had to do a cease and desist, which I'm not like a legal person. I'm not out to try and get it. But this person, I guess, is known for like trying to take people's stuff. Not like this. So, and I'm such a like kind, trusting person that I never thought that would be possible. So people listening, listen to Elaine, get your stuff trademarked. And I tell all my clients too, like, yes, it's an investment, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
Because when you invest in your brand, you need to protect it, unfortunately. Because other people are going to see it and be like, that's brilliant. Or it could already exist, which we look into when we create it usually too.
Well, when I thought about the name Color Your Dreams, right? I'm like, how does no one have this right now? And I trademarked it right away, got it. And what was shocking was there's someone that has a coloring book called Color Your Dreams. That's very popular, but it wasn't trademark. I was able to get it.
Wow. Well, sometimes too, if it's like an adjacent,
yeah,
I don't know what that's called, like totally different fields, it's okay. But yeah, that's why you do have to work with a lawyer because
if you want to,
there's a lot of details.
If you're an entrepreneur looking for a lawyer, my lawyer's Andrea Sager, and she's also a woman of color, Latina.
Yeah. And I did her brand.
Yeah. Oh, you did share that with me.
Yes. We rebranded last year with Andrea. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We just did her website and all that good stuff.
Oh, no wonder. I saw her website. I'm like, wow, this looks, of course you did it. I'll put her contact information in the show notes. I have an affiliate link because I literally refer her to a lot of clients. Legacy leader, want more tips and advice for your business, career, and life? Sign up for my Gifts and Gifts newsletter at elainelu.com/join. So here's 3 things you'll get. 1, you'll get funny gifts because who doesn't love memes and pop culture references? This newsletter is so fetch. 2, you'll also receive actionable gifts, tips on your business, career, and life. And 3rd, you'll also receive the gift of me. So my Gifts and Gifts newsletter is like an up-to-date diary. Think Zanga or Live Journal, where I'm going to share vulnerable stories, relatable mistakes, and important life tips like what to watch on Netflix. So if you're ready for those fun gifts and actionable gifts to create a more sustainable life, join my newsletter at elainelu.com/join. I'm going to share my screen for those of you that are listening to the podcast. Like I said, you could go to elainelu.com/podcast, look at the show notes. But even for my brand and my business, like I had my Color Your Dreams event. So I use that logo with pictures. When everything shut down because of COVID, I was able to once again use it with screenshots from Zoom calls. And in 2021, I was crazy and I just added 2 different offers, which were my Legacy Lifestyle Inner Circle and my High Organic Touch scripts. What was consistent was the heart. We were still able to use the heart. For the Legacy Lifestyle Inner Circle, we used a full heart that was circled to just show it's complete. And for the High Organic Touch, we put a heart in the O for hot. And just like everyone else for COVID, I burnt out. So I actually decided intentionally to get rid of my Color Your Dreams free events. It was taking up 1, too much energy. And then 2, I mean, even looking at numbers, not that everyone had to be a client that came to a free event or converted. It just felt like the energetic exchange was no longer even. Also, what I got rid of was my Align Legacy Mastermind because now I had 2 mastermind groups. My Align Legacy Mastermind for beginning entrepreneurs and then my Legacy Lifestyle Inner Circle. So I got rid of that. What I replaced in terms of getting people who were interested in wanting to work with me, aka leads, is that's what I called Tiffany up last year. I'm like, hey, I want to create like the Color Your Dreams podcast. That was easy to make. We already have the Color Your Dreams logo for free events. We just changed the word podcast. And then I wanted to create my newsletter. and at the time I called it Color Your Dreams newsletter. I would love for you to share why it was so easy for me to create something like that and to call you up on how I layered it.
Yeah, definitely. And first though, if you don't mind, I want to I just had a aha moment because I get to know my clients well. And of course we became friends over the process and everything, but I remember specifically, I think it even says it in your brand manual, which is like the document of like all of the, the vision, values, voice, messaging, all the foundational stuff, which isn't fun to screen share, but there's a lot there. I specifically remember in your vision though, because you were having those free events in LA live, that we wrote something around like be a global, I wish I could remember exactly what it said, but something around like being a global presence and having like global clients, like all online. And that was like before the pandemic hit. So it was so crazy. Like, of course the pandemic sucked and it was unfortunate, but connecting the dots looking backwards, like how that happened and unfolded, it makes sense that you would get rid of all of those free events that were like time consuming and draining in person because you were like all over the place online. It's kind of crazy actually.
Yeah. And also even before we were together and then throughout, I have worked with almost now 600 clients in 24 different countries. And I remember this happened. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of things happened for people of color, specifically the African American community. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and even now, like I remember how everything's so important talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I had a couple we're always talking about it as we should be, but during 2020, it was like at its peak.
It was at its peak. And I remember people said, oh my God, Elaine, your business is coming at the perfect time. I'm like, what are you talking about? My business has been here since like 2017. But what was great was that people knew that I wasn't trending and following along, that I've always had this messaging and it just worked out really well for me. Not that I wanted all the horrible things to happen. I did not want, and I'll be transparent. I also got caught up in what other people are doing. Like, okay, well, I see my other fellow women of color coaches doing DI work. Should I do that? I was seriously thinking about it, but I'm like, no, that's not my thing. The work is important, by the way, but I had to distinguish and create that decision of, no, this is the work I want to do. I want to coach my clients.
Yeah. So much. So anyways, back to your original question, the reason why it's simple once you have that foundation built to add on new, programs, new offers and or new marketing tactics like your podcast is because we've set the foundation in the brand. So again, when you came back, we're like, oh yeah, like we can just make a podcast graphic, a new logo, make the graphics, and it just evolved quite naturally. And again, because you were, like you said, that supporting women of color has always been a part of the business, but we dove deeper into that because it was so important to you in the branding process. That became very, very apparent and like front and center, which I think just allows people to know that you're a safe person and that they can trust you and all of those good things.
Well, and it got me thinking about things I needed to work on as well, right? So I got my trauma-informed certification. I went to therapy myself. So it's also all encompassing, not just in terms of strategy. And by the way, I didn't just become trauma-informed because I need to go do it because it's part of my brand strategy, but I want to share that because you just captured the essence and core of who I am, that naturally it was going to happen. And going back to what you're sharing with how working with women of color and allies is important to me, it's shown in my visuals. So if you look, since you're listening to a podcast right now, you could go to whatever streaming device and look at my podcast illustration. And Tiffany, I know you didn't work on this specifically, but you helped advise it. But we actually took one of the pictures from my events and use that as an inspiration for the art and the illustration that you see in the podcast cover. And if you notice it, the pink jumpsuit is me, but you will see women of color and allies in that picture. There's a picture of me in the corner, black and white, but we really wanted to focus on all the people here. I just want to say how easy it was to create this because I worked with you years ago.
Yeah, it's so fun to see it evolve. And then just grow, continue to grow and thrive.
Yeah. And another thing going into both of our 6 years in business almost is how easy it has gotten and how we could also both have a personal life. I remember we probably called each other or Voxered each other like once a week or once every other day. I think back in 2020 because it was overwhelming. But then when you have the brand strategy and the flow, you know what works for you and who you are, it becomes easier. Anything you want to share with that? And I want to, after this, I want to share an evolution of 2 new things I did for this year. But anything you want to share on that, Tiffany?
Yeah, no, I love that you share that. And, because we worked then, I was still, I was established in my business by the time we worked together, but I had, like I said, had made my corporate exit and started my business kind of like overlapping. And so you're one of the clients that I've seen have this longer evolution, because I work with so many clients. So it's so amazing to see that. And other women that I've worked with that, and a lot of them, that their brand the foundation has still stayed the same. We all grow and evolve, my own brand included, right? Like I've shifted, I added a podcast, I added quiz, I added different things. I shifted a few different programs, but the core essence is always there. So like you said, it's almost like set it and forget it, but then it's like moldable, right? But it's not like, again, you have to spend all this time, energy, or money. Like once you make that initial investment and get it done right, it is a breathing, living entity that you can keep crafting and molding, but you don't have to think about it. And it just makes life and business easier.
So I want to share 2 new things that I've created. One is more of an edit. Another one is kind of like in the back end, like a new service. One of it, as I shared earlier, we decided to create a Color Your Dreams newsletter, use the same logo, the C and D, last year. So I consistently did it every week. And I got burnt out and decided to do it every other week. But I felt like I don't even think I shared this with you. I think it kind of got confusing because then I called everything Color Your Dreams. There's a Color Your Dreams Inner Circle, which is my main mastermind group. Then there's Color Your Dreams podcast. And then there's a Color Your Dreams newsletter. And I just said, hey, you get funny gifts and you get, tips on business, career, and life tips. So I decided, you know what? I don't know if that name and that brand captures it. And I was literally at the gym. So I work out 3 to 5 times a week. And the creative energy just came to me like, actually, I should call it the Gifts and Gifts newsletter. Gifts in a sense where you're like memes, the 2-second gifts, because I do share it in all my newsletters, and gifts with a TS. So GIFTS, in terms of people do get gifts because I give business, career, and life tips. So I was like, oh, why don't I just rebrand it to Gifts and Gifts newsletter? So I literally called Tiffany up 2 weeks ago. Actually, I didn't call her. It was more like Boxer. And I think within 3 minutes, it was easy for us to create the new logo, which I'll showcase in my screen. It's basically a G on both sides mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
And even on my landing page, in my landing page, I have a GIF. It's actually Jasmine Parsons, one of my former clients, created a GIF of me because they called me Tiger Mama and always cheering them on. So if you go to elainelu.com/join, if you want to join my newsletter, so that's JOIN, you will see a GIF of me, my face on top of Drake saying, let's go. But it just captured my personality. And also I'm thinking, Tiffany, I'm like, if I wanted to create purses, this looks like a luxurious brand that I could use for purses. But I would love to get your thoughts when I asked for feedback about that, like literally 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Audience.
I know. And then you're like, oh yeah, you have to come back on the podcast. I was like, okay. Yeah. I use like 2 things. I do love having like everything branded somewhat similar because then people just know you for it. And like you said, there's times when you want to have a separate project and name it something different and kind of have fun with it. And this feels a little, so I loved your idea because it's like, oh, yes, I could sign up for a newsletter, but Gifts and Gifts, it makes it sound more like fun and approachable, right? And so I love that. And the main thing was that to not confuse people, that we kept the visual aesthetic the same. So when you're looking across the landscape of the brand, everything still flows. So it worked out perfectly.
And then another thing I added and used service is called the business health audit. And all of you want to learn more about it. It's for established entrepreneurs who need help in their strategy, marketing, as well as systems. But it's called the business health audit. And if you look at it here, it has a B, which is basically flipped as one side of the heart and an A on the other side. But if you look at the logos, all of my logos are consistent with the heart. And my business health audit is for business owners who are at least making $250,000, but they're feeling overwhelmed. And they get to work with me, my marketing strategist, as well as my certified project manager. So this was a higher level. And I'll just be transparent. I am not attached to having so many clients in this service. The reason why I'm not so attached to it is because I already have a funnel that is working for me. One, and two, I really want to showcase the type of clients that my team and I are working on, because it was so beginner that I was working with when you and I started working together in 2019. And I'll be transparent, I'm still working with some beginner folks. However, they need to have a certain type of mindset and grit to work with me.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, I think that's a perfect example of like, as we evolve, a lot of times our ideal clients evolve as well. Sometimes not. Like sometimes if your offer, like my group program can still serve, I've had 7-figure entrepreneurs in there. I've had newer entrepreneurs in there because everybody needs a powerful brand. So similar to you, but I could see how like, as you elevated the type of client you were working with elevated as well. And so that's sometimes why those offers need to change. But then it all goes back to like, as long as you have the foundation, you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say change your offers like every 2 months, obviously, because that will confuse people too. But really getting that clarity on your ideal clients. And then also, I've been talking about this a lot, is like the energetics. Like, I really do think branding is a spiritual process. And it makes me sound a little woo, but there is some of that in the brand. Like if your energy behind the brand, like even if I worked with somebody and we made the coolest logos like we made for you, but you didn't have the energy behind it to match that, you're not going to get the same results. So it goes hand in hand. Like I think there's a mindset to it. And then like you just declared, right? Like I'm who it is that you want to work with. If you're that clear and it's showing in your brand and you're talking about it in your social media, and which social media is part of your brand as well, then you're going to attract those people in. And that's the beauty of it. Like once you have that structure in place and you stick with it and your energy is aligned to it, like you almost can't fail. And when people do, it's usually because you've fallen out of alignment and then you readjust, right? So I think that's maybe like what we're showing here is like, you're like, okay, I was like super in alignment. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't feel. And it's like these little, like, what is that analogy of the ship, right? Like it's always off course. And like the whole captain's whole point is to like keep redirecting it, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like what we need to do in our business.
Well, I actually have a surprise for you and for our listeners that I didn't even warn you about. But you're going to be like, Elaine, I was just talking about how to keep it simple, but I just kind of want people to see even our relationship working with you and adding on a layer. But I do have an idea of another logo that I want to share with you in this podcast. It's actually not a new service. It's for my one-to-one coaching. So I'm going to showcase with you my idea. I want people to hear even your process. But if you notice like the one-to-one, right? The number 1 and then the colon 1. I'm thinking that it could be a heart like this. So it's like a curved heart. And then we could put like the 2 dots. So it kind of looks like both, by the way, on a side note, me and Tiffany used to play violin, but it kind of reminds me of a little, you know what I'm talking about? The colon.
The bass clef?
Yeah, the bass clef. So I think we could create like a 1-1 where it's like a curved one, unless you don't like it. What are your thoughts?
I love it. I think we'd have to see what it looks like if like it will be super obvious to people. But I think, and that's the thing too, is like, even if you probably won't promote that as much as you do, like the color of your dreams, but when somebody goes to The website, I immediately think about like, what is your services page going to look like? And if you have all these cute logos and then you just have like one-to-one coaching spelled out, it doesn't really match. So I love that idea.
Yeah. And what we usually do is like play with it. But if you want to look at the different, as soon as this logo is done, because it will happen after, well, it should be done by the time this podcast episode comes out, is I'll just put it in the show notes, but you can also look at all my logos on my website. So go to ElaineLu.com. But just wanted to kind of share that evolution. But another thing, when you have different things like this, is also in terms of strategy, being clear on how you get clients. So 70% of my clients comes from referrals. And then there's people that find me on Google SEO, sometimes social media. But what I do is I make it really easy. The next call to action is schedule a call with me. And then from that call, which is basically like a review or audit, then I could help them figure out what is the best service from there. So it's just been super easy.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do too. And again, it's going to evolve, but is to help people look at at least when we first create the brand, is like look at the structure. And then part of your brand story is, what is the narrative that you're going to talk about to bring people in? How are you literally going to call them to action? How are you going to act on that? And that can change over time. But I think that's a lot of the things too, is people just throw spaghetti at the wall on a lot of things. And to really take off, I think that's super important.
So for listeners, what is one action item you would have for them as they think about their brand and how they are, I don't want to say stand out. I think a better word to say is how they could be true to themselves. That's a better way to phrase it.
Yeah. Well, of course, I have a whole process that I take people through, but I think if you're just trying to get started and like thinking about it, the first step would to be like honestly journal about it, really think about it, and be honest with yourself. I would say, like, are you showing up as who you truly are? And a lot of people think they are. They're like, well, my voice is my voice. Like, I'm just going to show up as who I am. But if you go back to like the roots of like where your brand started or how you're showing up, a lot of the times, kind of like you said, I chose pink because it was kind of like trending at the moment. A lot of people will say like, well, I worked with this designer because the work is beautiful. Well, that's great. But was it their aesthetic or is it your aesthetic? Is your brand voice really you? Or did you learn from a copywriting coach that you just modeled because you didn't know what your voice was? You didn't take the time to find out what your voice is. So I'd really think about that and give yourself permission to be real and honest and open, because once you give yourself that permission, then you can take the next steps and like start the process of really finding out who you are as a brand. And it will, I don't want to say 10x, I'm not going to put numbers around it, because that's the thing is like a lot of my results for branding work, it's not like, a launch and it's like, oh, I made so much money. But with every client, as long as they do the work, it is like 2x, 3x, 10x results after they begin implementing the brand, because they've done that deep work, and then it becomes effortless.
I love your reflective question and action is this my voice? What is my voice? And not just in terms of business strategy, but I kind of, even though I did work with you, yes, and we got clear on my brand, but even last year, I got caught up because I was behind a screen all the time because of COVID and the pandemic. So in terms of the question of like, what is my voice? How do I honor it? I went back to therapy. So be honest with yourself in what you personally need to take care of that, not in a business sense, but also if you are a first-gen immigrant like me, we could probably get caught up on what our family members and our friends tell us to do. And we do it because of that rather than what we want. So what is the internal work you need to do? So Tiffany.
Yes.
If people want to take it a step further with you because they're in love with you, how do they do that?
Well, the best way is to connect with me on IG. I'm at Tiffany Neuman Creative, or the website is yourlegacybrand.com. So those two spots are really the best way. I'm on LinkedIn too, Tiffany Neuman with a U. But otherwise, I love to connect with people, so they can message me on Instagram or just start to follow and hang out. or I have a quiz on the website as well. And that'll really help people understand kind of where they are in their brand and what next steps that they could literally take other than what we just talked about.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being on this episode. And if anyone has questions about how it is to work with Tiffany, feel free to send me a message since I have worked with her. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, please feel free to share it with other people. Maybe you know someone that is interested in branding and needs it for their business, and leave a rating and review so women of color and allies get to know the Color Your Dreams podcast even more. So Tiffany, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Elaine. My pleasure as always.
Legacy Leader, if you enjoyed this podcast episode on the behind the scenes of my brand evolution and how you can honor your voice, here's 3 things you can do if you feel called to do them. 1, share this with a friend and send them a personal message on how this episode can specifically help them with their brand, business, and voice. 2nd, leave a rating and review for the Color Your Dreams podcast so more women of color and allies can join us on this movement. And 3rd, if you would like to see how to work with me to create a more sustainable life and business where you can do less and live more, schedule a complimentary legacy business review call at elainelou.com/call. That's ELAINELOU.com/call. Legacy Leader, did you enjoy today's episode? If so, subscribe to the Color Your Dreams podcast and leave a rating and review. It goes a long way and it lets other fellow leaders find this incredible free resource. And if you want more, you can find all the links and information mentioned in this episode in the show notes on my website at elainelou.com/podcast. That's ELAINELOU.com/podcast. All right, Legacy Leader, I'll see you in our newest episode in 2 weeks. And remember to follow your dreams to lead your legacy.